Hello, everyone, and welcome to First Thursday. Come on in and grab a seat. And I want to give a shout out to a couple things before we start. And while you're getting acclimated to the room here, this would be impossible to do without Flagstaff Creative. I always talk about these people, not because they pay us, but because he does some work for us, and then he does some free work. And the stuff that they do, when you see things by us that look good and they're spelled correctly and it looks like it was a designer did it, it's because Flagstaff is helping us out. And all the other stuff that looks bad and is wrong is probably things that I did. And so Jonathan Norton at Flagstaff, man, every church and organization that, there's free stuff out there you can get and use for creative things and websites and social media. And then there's really expensive stuff. And the best and brightest. And it's like, we can't afford that. We can't afford it, can we? And so Jonathan strikes that stuff right in the middle. It's fast, it's quick, it's cost effective. And yet he works around and has worked around some of the finest and best and greatest things. So he's a huge friend of ours, Flagstaff Creative. I've dropped the link there. I'll put it in the show notes. And you're welcome to check them out. Tell them Andy Brightbill sent you. I want to introduce my friend Andy from 12 Stones today. It strikes me that if you are interested in internships, residency, if you're interested in finding and developing and supporting the next generation to go into ministry, then you've probably heard about 12stone Church. It's 12 Stone, by the way. Correct. I just learned last night. People are always saying leadership pathways when they talk about leadership pathways. I'm like, no, it's leadership pathway and it's Walmart. It's not Walmart's, and it's 12 Stone. It's not 12 Stones. I always say 12 Stones. So 12 Stone Church down in Atlanta area. Gosh, I don't know. I think they were the first on the scene. They might not have been. There probably were other people doing it, but at the level that they have done it and inspired many of us. Leadership Pathway, helping churches launch residency and helping them coach young 20 to 25-year-olds into ministry. We'll turn 7 this year, but 5 years before that, the core of us were all working together at a college. And we sent a guy to 12 Stone because we were working at this school, kicking the juniors and seniors out to go into residency across the country. And it really was the early seed planting that became Leadership Pathway at some point. And I remember his name is Andy Dikehouse, and he went to 12 Stone and he got in the room, and a guy by the name of Miles Welch showed him around, and Andy was texting me from the back of the room, and he's like, I have found what we've been kicking the tires on and dreaming about, and we get to skip several years of pain going through this because this is what we envision right here. So fast forward, meeting these people, learning from them, stealing from them over the years has been, we owe it. We owe who we are to these people that go out ahead of us, and it's right time, right place, God, the Holy Spirit, some resources. And so welcome, Andy. It's great that you're here. Andy leads all of that down there and some other leadership development things for the church and others. And it's Wesleyan. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
What's it mean to be a Wesleyan?
What does it mean, Dave? It means so many things. It's part of the holiness movement. Obviously, okay. John Wesley, part of founding that, branched off from the Methodists.
Okay.
In the late 19th century.
Yeah. Before we get into this, I always ask every guest, like, what were you doing between age 18 and 25? Because I always love hearing people's, those are formative years, right? We all know that. Those are the formative years. Where were you? What were you doing?
Some of it was probably not that great.
But still formative.
I'll keep some of that to myself.
Yes.
I grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
I grew up there, but then went to college, went to a small school in northern Indiana, Grace College.
Oh, yeah.
And felt in high school called to ministry. So I was on that route, but also went to college on an athletic scholarship, played some golf.
Okay.
And really prepped to be a pastor. and that was my dream. And
that was okay.
I didn't know. I mean, if somebody told me when I was 20 that one day you would be doing things in leadership expansion, like, that sounds like a lot of fun. I don't know what that is.
Right.
So somebody's gonna have to define it for me. And so I took my first job out of college at a church in Pennsylvania as a student pastor. And that's really where I cut my teeth in ministry. I tell our residents all the time, most of the stuff I teach you, I either learned from Dan Ryland, who is our executive pastor here for a long time, or I'm going to tell you what I screwed up and then how I should have done it that wasn't broken.
I love it.
And so that's what I was doing from 18 to 25, really messing a lot of things up.
Yeah.
Is what I was doing.
Yeah. So you're a pretty traditional guy. Graduated 22, loaded up, put everything in the trunk. Were you married? Were you single?
I was married. Yeah.
Okay. Drove her to
Pennsylvania.
Small town, big church, small church.
It was a mid-sized church, and it was growing. It grew rapidly in those years, and it was a really messy ending for me at that first church.
Yeah.
A lot of hurt that I had to get through. Honestly, Dave, after that, I was like, I don't think I'll ever work at a local church again.
How about that? How long were you there, Andy? How long did you make?
5 years. I was there 5 years.
Okay. All right.
And then I spent 5 years working in the mental health space. My master's degree's in psychology, counseling. And so I worked in that space for a little while. And actually, I moved to the Atlanta area to help a friend of mine start a business. It was going to be leadership, coaching, and development stuff. And that's how I got to Atlanta. And then I started attending at 12stone.
Okay.
And one thing led to another. And my friend who I'd started the business with said, hey, I got a relatively young family at home. He had another company he was running. Kind of said, hey, my health isn't going to allow me to sustain this.
Yeah.
Something's got to go. And so it was what we were trying to get off the ground. And so prayed about it, felt as clearly as God's ever said anything to me. Said, I want you to stay in Atlanta. I had every intention of going back to Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And 12stone was launching 5 campuses at one time.
Yeah.
Which I don't, I think we would all agree together. We probably shouldn't do that again.
Yes.
But really felt like it was what God asked. And that's what brought me on staff at 12stone.
What year was that?
2014. So I'm here 10 years.
Yeah. How about that? What do you think? Let's go back to, it ended poorly, but you did make it 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends on who you read, what you believe, and what's made up. But it's either 18 months or 3 years is the average stay in ministry or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Within 5 years, all seminary grads are quitting. I read that one last night. I'm like, I don't know what these statistics. I don't know. Like, who counts all of this? And half of it's made up, but we know it's not good. Is it 18 months or 5? Either way, it's not nearly long enough. What do you think? What's your take? You personally kind of went through it. Mm-hmm. Now you're helping all sorts of other people not do it. What do you think it is? Do you think it's, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth. What do you think it is?
I mean, I think it's a variation on a lot of the same things. And I think one of the reasons is that people don't envision the difficulty that the calling requires.
Okay.
I think they get to seasons that are hard and go, I thought this was going to be easier than it was.
Yeah.
I also think, and especially, I'm 45. So, there were no residencies around when I was there. So I went the academic route and was not prepared for the people side.
Did you get an internship or for a summer or anything?
Yeah, I did. I did some internships. I did some other ministry experience things. They were really helpful to me.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that hurt me the most was the personal development side.
Right.
I mean, one, I had the emotional intelligence of a chair, and was just, it was about using people to fuel my vision.
Right.
And it wasn't about leading people, shepherding people, caring for people, serving people. And I don't think that was a skill deficit for me. It was a personal development deficit for me.
Right. You go-getter, type A.
Enneagram, type A, driver. Yeah. Enneagram 8, if that's helpful.
I mean, 3 or 8. I just feel, don't you just think the 20s in church leadership, the 20s are tumultuous for those people. I'm one of them too, man. gosh, and the nice thing about getting, I'm not going to say my age because Kristen always gets on me for saying that, but for getting a little distance away, it's a little easier to talk about. I can kind of sum it up a little easier. But man, when you're 23 and you come out of school and you want to change the world, and it doesn't take much encouragement. Like most of my raises and advancement were because of workaholism and crazy behavior.
Yeah.
And then eventually that catches up to you. And so
and the internal pressure, the internal pressure you feel to go, well, my friend got promoted, so he's doing the thing that I dreamed of doing.
Sure.
So what do I have to do to get that to happen as fast as I can get it to happen?
Yeah.
And give me the bigger stage, give me the bigger leadership, give me the bigger position. And part of it is trying to help, like even now trying to help young leaders go, hey, that's not gonna fix what's broken, man.
But they interview so well, Andy.
Well, and we all like the drivers.
Yeah.
Because they make things happen.
Sure.
And that's great. I think you can make things happen and still be a healthy person.
Yeah. Well, I think we're smarter today than we were back then, too. What do you think?
I agree.
I did not have language to put I was like 35 before I really began to frame up why I would get bored or impatient, what the 20s were about. And gosh, man, now we're talking to 18, 19-year-olds, and they've at least got the tools in their hands. Do they fully understand? And I don't know. I don't know that I still fully understand, but the 20s are a tumultuous run if you're minded to be in leadership and at a normal church.
I agree.
Okay. All right. So you've been at it 10 years. You've been
10 years here at 12stone.
Yep. Leadership development and the residency thing. How long have you done that?
About 4 years now.
Okay. 4 years in. Give us the origin. When did somebody first say residency? Do you know around there? When did this begin?
I think that the terminology shifted. We had been running the program almost 20 years.
Okay.
And, Dan Ryland, Kevin Myers, our founding pastor, just really had a heart for leadership and leadership development.
Yeah.
And leaned in that space and started looking at the landscape of what was happening in church. And, one of the statements that I've heard them say frequently is at some point the church outsourced the development of the next generation of church leaders.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that got broken in the church space is that the church needed to recapture and take on that mantle again to go, hey, we're going to be the ones that raise up the next generation of church leaders. And so it's that 20-year journey. It started like a lot of good things do at church, kind of by accident.
Right.
There's a couple of young guys who were part of 12stone, went off to University of Georgia, got their degrees in business or whatever it was. But while they were there, kind of said, hey, I think God might be talking to me about being a pastor. And if I come and hang out with you for a little bit, can somebody let me see what that looks like and how I do it?
Yeah.
And that was the start. And God kept bringing more people and things got more formalized. And so it was about 15 years to 12 years into it where things started really getting formalized and we started going outside of our reach and recruiting and bringing in people. And so, today I've got a team of 3 that are the residency, myself, and then we have a director of resident life, as well as an operations coordinator who handles some of the administrative detail and other things.
Okay.
And we've got 32 residents as it stands presently.
Okay. 32 residents. I know your job is bigger than residency, right? Do you do internships? Are you reaching down into high school kids even? And can you give us some little sense of what's going on in those worlds that might be feeding this in the future?
Yeah, we're literally working on a comprehensive strategy starting in KidServe. And what we mean by that is, hey, 4th or 5th graders who have a spiritual intensity that's unusual for them at that age and a heart to lead. Doesn't mean they're called to ministry. It just means, hey, how can I use my gifts to serve the local church, all the way up through even adults who've started marketplace careers that are maybe rethinking that and God's called them to ministry, or saying, hey, I don't know that I'm called to ministry, but I want to be more effective in being Jesus in my business
Yep.
Or how can I more effectively use my gifts and lead in the local church? So literally from 10 into adulthood.
Yeah.
And so we had a summer internship. We're restarting that.
Okay.
We would say that our
You said
summer
restarting
internship,
it?
yeah,
Okay.
next summer. It's
Got
a
away
10-week
from you, or
experience.
what happened there?
COVID. I don't know if you guys had that
Oh.
where you are. We had COVID
Did
here.
y'all do that in Atlanta?
Yeah, I don't know if it was familiar. But we had that. And it kind of went on the back burner, and some of the team who helped lead that was contracted. And so we're bringing that back. We would say it this way. Our internship is designed to elevate or eliminate call to ministry.
Okay.
Our residency is for people who feel a clear call to local church ministry.
So you believe in calling?
We do.
Let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
What
would you like me to talk about?
I have no question.
Open water. Why?
By the way, everyone that's watching, there is a chat window. You can drop your questions in. I'll make sure Andy hits them. But I want to talk about calling as it relates to delayed adolescence, right? Which is real, plus COVID. Delayed adolescence, which I think I first heard that 10 years ago while I was still working at a college. And I'm like literally on my phone, like looking at like, what's he even talking about? Aren't 18-year-olds still, like they were in 1954? And so, delayed adolescence. Turns out it's a thing. Then we go through COVID. That's a decade ago. We were talking about millennials. We were talking about millennials who are now approaching grandparents. But late on, and then times COVID divided by culture. Okay. Delayed adolescence as it relates to calling as it relates to delayed. Does it matter? Can a 22-year-old clearly? How do you get to it?
I think a few things that we look for when we think about calling. One is, we ask the question, what has God told you about what you want to do?
Okay. And
so we ask that question, but we also look at, hey, like for people who are called to ministry, they can't help themselves but serve in the local church. Okay. So we have a candidate, we ask them, hey, where are you currently serving?
Yes.
And they go like, well, I'm not currently involved in my local church. It'd be like me saying, I think I'd like to play professional basketball. And you were asking me, where are you currently playing basketball? I was like, I'm not playing any basketball at all. Right. I just think I'm going to do it at a really high level one day. Yeah. And also about passions and wirings and reading the narrative of your own life.
Yes.
Here's what's really interesting, Dave. And I know you and I had talked a little bit about talking about generational differences. I think that the COVID generation is passing, and the generation that's rising past that is gonna reshape how we think about some of those things.
Okay.
I think two of the hallmark characteristics of Gen Z are their desire for belonging and impact as the primary hallmarks of that generation. Yeah. And you look at the impact piece and go, they have a natural proclivity as a generation to say we want to be different than generations that preceded us.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we have enough data on Gen Alpha yet, or even if we'll continue to call them Gen Alpha, to know where that is going to fall. But I think that's a massive piece for the rising generation of church leaders.
Belonging and impact in particular, how they view work. This is why we keep talking, residency is a two-way street. We got a lot to learn from 23-year-olds, 22-year-olds.
Yep.
Good things that they will bring to the table. If we will give them a chance to belong, they'll make an impact, and they might shape our behaviors for the better. I think you're right. They look at people, certainly my generation and older, and they're like, well, I don't want to turn out like that. So then we tag it as quiet quitting. We tag it as lazy. We tag it as something that I think we ought to be learning. How do you take a Sabbath? How do you rest? How do you keep yourself whole so you can make an impact? How do you belong? These are some core things that we see it going the other direction. Once there's trust built and once these things are loaded in, like we have things to learn from them that I think are very positive.
I agree. I mean, I think we're pulling them into conversations on decisions we're making for direction of the church and how we go about doing things. I don't know why you wouldn't. Because these are the people
who's going to reach your generation.
These are the people you're trying to reach. And you have a room full of them. Like, why would you not go, hey, tell me about what you think?
Okay.
about this sermon series, about this serving initiative, about, how we're structuring things.
Calling's a heavy word, isn't it? Is it a heavy word?
It
Or
is.
freeing? How would you?
I think you've got to look at it as both.
Okay.
I think you got to look at it as both. And I think it's freeing in the sense that now I understand the impact that I'm going to make or want to make, and the direction in which I'm going to make it.
Yeah.
I think it's heavy in the sense that I think it should be heavy for all of us. I mean, when God says, hey, for those of you who aspire to the work of overseer, it's a noble thing, but you're also going to bring on a harsher judgment.
That's right.
And so I think there should be a weightiness to that.
Yeah.
But I also think it informs the lengths you're willing to go to make something happen. We talk about all the time. Calling's really easy until it costs you something.
Right.
But until there's a cost, it's just a job. You could go work at Target or Chipotle or wherever.
Yeah.
And just get a paycheck.
Yeah.
But calling is going, no, this is what I feel God's asked of me.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to go walk it out.
It's great. Okay. So I heard you have 3 staff, you're working with 38 residents. Do you still have out? There was a time where there were partner churches across the country that you were in. Are you still doing that? We
do not.
Okay.
We do not. We ended that about 5 to 7 years ago.
Smart.
It just, part of it too is the structure.
I'm not making fun of you. I'm laughing because people are like, well, it sounds, when I describe what we do, and they're like, well, that sounds hard. I'm like, yeah, you're trying to shape someone an airplane ride away on the other side. It's really tough. So,
and not just that, Dave. I mean, it's everything is so contextualized.
Yeah. I hear you.
That staffing structures and priorities and pressures and all of those things are so unique to how a program is structured that they're not always one-to-one kinds of things.
Cool. Okay. What are when somebody signs on what are your outcome goals for that person? It's 2 years. Is that right?
2 years. Yeah.
2 years. So there are 8, you said 8 of them were walking in yesterday or something?
We had 8 of them start on Monday.
You got the retreat and they start. And in 2 years, in June of 26, right? They're done.
They are.
What's the win? We got wins and fails. And then if you play soccer, there are ties. It's not wins or so we try to think that way. I tend to be more black and white about it, but what's a win? What's a fail? What's other to you?
Our goal is to help people called to local church ministry to fulfill that calling for a lifetime.
Okay.
So that's what our heart is.
All right.
And so a win when they get to the end of their 2 years is that we help them find a job working in a local church where they're moving the kingdom forward.
They're employed.
That's what we're after.
They're employed.
Yep. At a local church in their call.
Yeah.
And a loss for us is that is not the case.
Yeah. So they quit halfway through and they go they become a real estate agent. That's a fail. They're a deacon at their church, but they're a real estate agent.
Well, here's what we would say. Our goal is lifetime of calling. And so we would say it this way too. We want to have conversations along the way.
Yep.
And so if somebody came to me halfway through and they said, hey, I'm not sure being a pastor is what I want to do.
Right.
I want to go be a real estate agent, or I want to go the academic route, or I want to go do this other thing, and go, that's great.
Yeah.
Let's have some conversations about what it looks like to be the church in that field.
Sure.
But let's also free up your residency spot
Gotcha.
for someone who may want to be a part of this.
Gotcha.
And do their calling for a lifetime. So if we can help free them up and get them to where they want to go, I just say this all the time. It's a win for the kingdom when people are where God wants them to be.
True.
So if that's real estate or pastor, it's still a win for the kingdom.
And in their story in a decade from now, it's going to be like, and if I hadn't met that person during that residency, I would have never done. And God's grace and his faithfulness, he redeems all that. Right. Mm-hmm. But you don't set out there.
No.
Your true north is they've got a job at a local church.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
That's what we're after.
That's what we're after. Okay. So some things have changed. Some things have changed since last week. But some things have definitely changed since you started doing this.
Yep.
Some things have definitely changed since 12 Stones began, right?
Mm-hmm.
Doing it. So give us 2 or 3 things that are just, this is different. This is fundamentally different today than it was at some point in the past. Give us 2 or 3.
I think how you recruit changes.
Okay.
You know, there are things that appeal generationally, and you've got to be able to discern what's happening in the culture.
Yeah.
To understand what speaks to somebody.
Yeah.
You know, you talked about, Gen Z, it's about belonging and impact.
Yeah.
And so you have to be able to talk with them about what community looks like.
Yep.
You have to be able to talk with them about their tribe and how they're going to find it. And one of the beauties of, a residency program is it might be the first time for that young person that they're around people who share the same passion and calling and direction of their life and just a natural lean into community.
Yeah.
But you also have to allow them the opportunity to do meaningful ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And while part of that has never changed,
right,
and I don't want it to ever change, and I don't think it should ever change,
right,
you've got to be able to let them see and experience to go, hey, here's the impact you're making.
right.
And here's the impact we intend for you to make and we've built for you to make.
Yeah. If
you come and spend some time with us.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a piece. I think the model.
So let's pause for just a second.
Sure.
This is the number one. That's probably the number one question every time, because people think that we have like a warehouse full of people ready to go to just ship.
You don't.
Ship in a return shipping policy if you don't like them, and I'm like, no, we're going to do this together. So someone my age or even younger. I mean, sometimes the old veteran 35-year-old youth pastors, honestly, and kids direct, they're the veteran leaders on the team, right? They are, and they're amazing. But they start saying things like, it sounds like the Marines, the chosen, the proud, the special ones, the one who can come to the table with their elbows out and get in front of the line. That's who I'm at. I'm like, I don't think you're going to find what you're looking for talking like that. That's what you mean. The practical implication of belonging and impact.
Yeah.
The tone.
You've got to start with them, not start with your program.
Great. I love it.
Like I love to ask this question and steal it, take it, whatever. What do you dream of doing? Not 5 years down the road. Right. What do you dream is true in your life 20 years from now? And let's talk together about, hey, if it is selling real estate, who do I know that can help you with that dream?
Right. It's good.
Because I don't want to be exclusive. I want to help students fulfill their calling. And I hope it's to the local church, but if it's somewhere else and I know somewhere I can make that helpful, I want to do that. But you've got to start with them. And that you can't be selective in who you want more from.
Yeah.
Or who when you want more for someone than from someone.
Yeah. Right.
You can't pick and choose when you flip that switch.
Yeah. That's
either true of you always or it's not true.
Yep.
And when it's true always, that's attractional to everybody.
That's so good. Someone from Nashville says, you're great, Andy, by the way.
Very kind.
And she said, what do you do with older residents? They're like 30 to 50 who are sensing a call to ministry. Or do you limit it? You limit it to the traditional 22-year-olds. What are you doing? Anything speaking of recruiting, of course, but anything changing there?
Our residency, the predominant number of our residents, I would say 2/3 to 3/4 of our residency is filled with people who've just finished college.
Okay.
Now I'll say this: the class we just brought in is the oldest class. I'm willing to say this, even though I don't have firm data on it. It's probably the oldest average age of a residency class we've ever brought in at 12 Stone.
Yeah.
We have a 28-year-old, 2 27-year-olds, and a 25-year-old. And there's different reasons for all of them for why they joined the program.
Yeah.
Part of it is to go, it's hard. But we do limit it. Yeah. And here's why we limit it. Yeah. It's hard to create something that speaks to a 40-year-old and a 22-year-old at the same time. And half of what we're doing, and I think half of what's true in most residencies, is you're not just equipping them to be a pastor, you're equipping them to be an adult, a professional person working in the world. And a lot of times people who are coming from marketplace, they don't need that.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason why we're
Right.
looking to go, hey, what are we doing for people in that space?
Right.
Because if there's been a decline in people entering local church ministry, one thing I am banking my life on is that God's not going to let his church fail, which means he's bringing leaders in from somewhere. Yeah. And so we're trying to build some things to capture that, but that's what we're doing.
Okay. It strikes me you can train them together. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. We spend I think Kristen and her people spend a lot of time talking about the difference between this idea of training, which is a thing. It's very important. And it could be anything from here's the database. Here's an hour with the IT person. Oh my goodness, shoot me in the face. Or it could also be Old Testament history, by the way. We're training. And in America, we do a great job at training. It's called college, seminary. And 40-year-old, 20-year-old, super smart people, not very smart. They're all in the room. They're receiving this, and giving it back and getting a grade or something. Training, even staff training. But then you get into these things about community, coaching, the difference around coaching or mentoring, whatever you want to call it. These deeper things you're talking about life skills, soft skills, about how you show up, emotional intelligence. 20-year-old and 40-year-old in a room, it's not going to land. I don't think it can. I think it's hard.
It's tricky. It's definitely tricky. And, let me say this, because you and I talked about this, Dave, and it might be helpful. We talked about training and coaching and that umbrella. Here's kind of the paradigm that I like to think through, and that we think through here. There's really only three aspects of development. Okay. There's skill development, there's leadership development, there's personal development. Yeah. And what we're constantly trying to do is help our residents close developmental gaps. Yeah. And those gaps exist: skill, leadership, personal. I think they close with different speeds. I think the fastest gap to close is a skill gap. Sure. Because I can teach you how to do it, and now you know how to do it. I think a leadership gap closes slower because you have to be able to nuance it, you have to be able to internalize it, and you have to be able to contextualize it. Yeah. That's different. Yeah. But the personal development gap closes the fastest, or the slowest. Sorry, the slowest. For sure. Because it's insidious. It's stuff that's been deep seated. There might be some wounds attached to it. There might be some things. But here's where it gets really tricky. Because you can't just go training or coaching. You've got to be able to know which of those three buckets you're attacking. That's great. Let me explain what I mean. Like when you think about recruiting, let's take recruiting new volunteers. Everybody wants their resident to be able to recruit new volunteers because everybody wants more volunteers, period, in what they're leading in their church. Yeah. A resident may not be able to recruit volunteers because nobody's ever taught them the skill in how to do it. Yeah. So if that's the case, I just give them the skill and off they go. Yeah. But some residents can't recruit a new volunteer because they can't internalize the vision and then connect it nuance to the individual's gifting they're trying to recruit. That's not a skill gap, that's a leadership gap. Yeah. But some people can't recruit volunteers because they feel some kind of way about asking somebody to do something. So good. So here's what we've got to think about when we're coaching. You've got to be able to identify which of the gaps you're trying to close, because if you keep trying to close everything and viewing it as a skill gap, the gap's going to persist because it's not a skill gap. Maybe it's a leadership gap. Totally. Or maybe it's a personal development gap. And so, it's some of it is pure skill all the time. It's hey, here's how you use the database. Here's how we train small group leaders. Here's how we do fill in the blank thing at my church. At your church, do you use mentoring or coaching? What's your language on that? Coaching. Or both? Coaching. We refer to coaching. Coaching coaches. Let's talk about that. Yep. You've got a youth. How many campuses do you have? 9. So you got some person you maybe can remember her name. She's the youth pastor out there, or his name, right? Yeah. Kid, and they're getting a resident. How one of the things we hear over and over, chasing. Well, first of all, determining who gets one. Yep. So here's what we would say.
Is this one of these things that's changed for you, or is it the same way it's always been?
No. Yeah. I mean, you're all smart people, so you've all figured this out. There's really only 3 lids to a residency program: budget, the number of quality residents you can find, and the number of quality coaches that you have. And there's really, outside of that, there's really not any other lids. Right. When we look for a coach, what we're looking for is someone that has a proven track record of development. In other words, if you went and looked at their ministry that they were leading, if they were the student pastor at the campus down the street, are they empowering volunteers to carry ministry? Because what I don't want is to risk giving them a resident and hoping that they can do it.
So if I'm at a church, if I'm at a church of 500, the Lutheran church, First Lutheran, Waukegan, Wisconsin, and I'm at a church of 500, and I'm looking for somebody to take the first resident, and there's maybe 6 employees there, right? Kids, youth, students, worship. You're looking for someone. Their team has gotten their volunteer crew has gotten larger and better. Would you say it like that?
Just absolutely.
Down, okay.
And not only have they gotten better and larger, but that they're actually doing meaningful ministry.
Sure.
And I think it's got to be
the impact thing, isn't it?
Yep.
You can't be setting the chairs up. That's all they're going to do is set the chairs up.
Well, we could talk about that. I mean, when you talk about what undercuts a program, that's it.
Yeah.
Where they're not doing anything meaningful.
Yeah.
But we can talk about that later. Right. So that's what we're looking for in coaches. And we build regular checkpoint. Every checkpoint we have with the resident, we have with the coach.
Okay, cool.
And we're increasing training inside of that. We used to do 1 training a year. Now we're doing 2 trainings a year and department huddles. Yeah. It's just because it's really easy to look at the resident and say, the resident's not getting better because of the resident. And while that's sometimes true, I would go so far as to say, I think 80% of the time, the reason why the resident isn't getting better is because of the coach.
This is something I hear over here.
Well,
and this is new to us.
I'll give you
because church leaders are our heroes, by the way. These people are still doing it. I quit a long time ago, by the way. These people are still in the trenches. They are still doing it. They're still figuring it out. And so it took me, especially me, it took me a while to come around to that. And now I think coaching the coaches, I have 80%, 3/4 of it. When it's not going well, what are we going to address? Man, I don't knock them. These churches are full of amazing people that get stuff done 52 a year and do ministry. And then you pile on something called a residency, and it's a lot of talking and coaching and work, and it's harder. It gets harder. It's like God and me. God could get done without me. He could get it done a lot easier. But he chooses to partner with me so his spirit can work through me. And we see a model of that here. It's like suddenly Wednesday nights at First Lutheran Church, and it's harder to get done because we are talking to someone about how to do it, right?
Yep. Well, and development is high importance, low urgency.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's always going to be true. So we get ministry pressure, and the first thing that leaves, because we got to get stuff done, is development. But what's true is that the exponential impact of development over time allows us to accomplish significantly more,
for sure,
than we would if we didn't develop,
for sure.
And so it's keeping that vision in front of coaches.
Yeah,
is to go, you're actually going to get to the point where yes, it's work on the front end.
Yeah.
But on the back end, you're now operating at 150, 175% capacity because you've coached your resident well. And they're carrying weight, and you're carrying weight, and you're getting to things you could never get to. And
well, isn't that the beauty of the second year? For the tradition, if just talking about 22, that is the beauty of the second year. So if you're watching this and you only do 10 months, which a lot do, and I think it maybe, I don't know, maybe it helps in recruiting. Come here, it's only 10 months. But that's but you're shortchanging all of us in some ways. What the church could benefit from it, the more impactful work The impact work, to your point, should be continuing to go up through that year. They should be getting wins and more home runs in that second year.
Here's a way to think about it, and maybe this is helpful and maybe it's not helpful. There's really only two things that can drive a residency program or an internship program. It's either going to be solving ministry pressure at that local church, or it's going to be about the development of residents. And when you trace back what you're doing and how you're doing it, it really is going to boil down to one of those two things.
Yeah, totally.
And when you decide which one it is, you have to structure for that. I'm not faulting people because I get it. You know what I'm saying? I wasn't always the resident director. I had student ministry responsibilities. I had spiritual formation responsibilities. I had teams that I led, and I wanted them to get stuff done. So I get the ministry pressure piece. But I would also say that a residency program that's designed to solve pressure, if that's all it ever does, it will eventually cannibalize itself.
Of course. Yeah, that's great.
But when development drives, it drives every decision. And that's one of the reasons why we go 2 years.
Yeah.
I think there are the things you get to post the 1 year mark are really the things that are sitting in that kid's soul that if it doesn't get addressed, will take them out.
Yeah.
You can polish something and make it look better in a year. But the stuff that surfaces in the second year are the motivations and the drivers and the unhealth.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to help them wrestle down with help so that they don't leave and have to go somewhere else and figure it out or not figure it out.
Yeah. I think I can fake anything for 10 months. I know I can fake 3 weeks on a mission trip because I've done it or a summer internship or a semester. And this is why these things they're helpful, but it's not it's you're saying yes to something and you could be saying yes to something way better. And I think you're on it, dude. And that impact piece, all of it. Probably what that coach is going to learn in the second year in parallel to the resident, the stuff they're going to get to. Why am I so impatient with this person? These things that just bring the stuff out of us also. What do you do? I get a question here. What do you do? Even at 12stone, you have amazing people who it's not working out there at that campus or in the cubicle office next to whatever, right? Right? How do you do it? What do you do?
In the coach-resident relationship?
Yeah, something's not right, and I'm sniffing this, and we've been here before, and I think I know what it is, and it's not the resident's problem, maybe.
No, I mean, there's a number of things that we do. First, let me give you a couple of things that we believe pretty deeply. I think development always is better, deeper than wider.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that means for us is it takes an awful lot for us to move a resident.
Yes.
Because the involvement at the campus, the relationships at the campus, the relationships with the coach, are critical. But I would also say this, healthy culture kind of has a way of weeding people out that aren't healthy.
Yeah.
And so that helps of its own. But if that scenario presented, I just think it's the courage to have the conversation.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, and I might have done this maybe once since I've been the residency director here at 12stone, is to go, hey, the best thing for this resident who I promised would have a developmental experience isn't being fulfilled.
Right.
So I've got to move this resident. But here's what's true. It's rare that it takes a year to figure that out.
Totally, man.
If you pay attention, you're going to know that. You're going to know that 3 months in.
Run towards the smoke. That's what.
Yep. And the other thing too, we tell our residents and our coaches, and it's just on loop, is, hey, come to us when problems are 1, 2, 3 out of 10.
Yeah.
Because when things are 4, 5, 6 out of 10, gosh, and then when things are 7 and higher out of 10, that's a different.
Yeah.
I mean, now you're dealing with a real problem.
How do you help someone? Let's say they're the veteran 33-year-old and they're going to coach. They're getting a resident. Coaching It's always a mix. We talk about the art and science of it.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it is art.
Yep.
Which implies, man, once you've done this 20 times, you really begin to feel, you can feel it out like an improv musician or something, right? We try to front load it with as much science as we can and curriculum and helps and training, but is that why you're checking in? You're doing the monthly or whatever it is? I mean, it's like, can you speak to that at all? Has that changed over the years? Have you dialed it up?
I think the things that have to be addressed are nuanced generationally. Right. But I think the underpinning of it has remained constant.
Right.
And what we try to do is demystify coaching and simplify it for people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think sometimes, I don't know about everybody else, I'm really good at complicating things that could be simple.
Yeah.
You know, and I think at the end of the day, here's a couple of things that are true about coaching. Number one, a coach has to have high belief in a resident. Yeah. And along with high belief has to come high challenge.
Yeah.
I know not everybody's a sports person. I'm a sports guy. I watched a documentary on Mike Krzyzewski, who coached Duke basketball. And whether you know who that is or not, it doesn't matter. Here's two things they did in practice every day. Coach K would literally stop practice if one player made a play that benefited another player and that player didn't thank the first player for making the play.
Oh, that's great.
He would stop practice and said, you're communicating that you don't believe in your teammate.
Yeah.
And that's critical to this. And so part of it is to come to a coach and go, hey, listen, how are you communicating belief in your resident? And then the other thing they do in practice every day, and this is staggering. When I heard it at first pass, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And I started thinking about it more.
Yeah.
He said, we address 100% of the mistakes we see made in practice.
Yeah.
But when you have a culture of high belief, you can have a culture of high challenge.
Mm-hmm.
If you have high belief without high challenge, you just create complacency.
There you go.
If you have high challenge without high belief, you create a fear culture.
Yeah.
But when you have high belief and high challenge, what you have is a culture that high achievers want to be a part of because they're cared for, but they also know they're going to grow.
Yeah.
And that's a piece of it. And I also think too is demystifying coaching. Dan Ryland said it this way. He said, it's just the right word at the right time.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be an hour conversation. It can just be a 30-second statement in passing. And it helps to just simplify it for people.
Yeah. How has education changed? I mean, I'm talking about formal education. You know, you put on the cap and gown and walk across the stage, get a piece of paper. You're going to be a youth pastor. And we all have our own story. Journey, and then there's perspective when you see a few hundred or a few thousand in their journey through undergrad, seminary. How's it changed? What's your opinion? How you doing? You know, I know you're in a denomination that probably has some requirements. Mm-hmm. This is recorded, by the way. Don't forget, Andy. We're recording.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Forever. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks. Let me answer your question by telling you some shifts we've seen in the types of residents we've been getting.
Yeah.
I think if you went back 10 to 20 years and you looked at the first decade of our residency program, I would think that you would see a majority of Christian college graduates that are in our residency program. And I think what we've seen specifically in the last 10 years and especially the last 3 years is an uptick in two types of residents in particular. Number one is the increase in people that went to secular universities that are feeling called to ministry outside of that. I think some of that has to do with the local church now is requiring different skill sets of people than traditional pastors would get in a traditional education. Mm-hmm. And it's also people who are saying, listen, I went to school to be an accountant or a music teacher or whatever. And in that journey, God said, nope, I want you to go serve the local church. Yeah. We've also seen a high uptick in the number of people that didn't have any schooling. Right. That God is calling to ministry. Yeah. And I think that's the future. I think part of what we've got to figure out in the church space is that we've got kids going to, liberal arts colleges and they're leaving with tens of thousands of dollars of school debt.
Tens.
Yeah. Well,
If they've done really
100,
well.
100 plus. I mean, you're looking at some of these places.
I know.
To go, none of us got into ministry for the paycheck.
Right.
And they're cutting them off at the knees.
Right.
And so I think we've got to get more creative on how we're supplementing that for people.
Here's the reality. We were talking about this yesterday. We talk about it every day, I think, but salaries, it's cultural, right? In this country right now, the top salaries have gone up, but a lot of salaries have been, a teacher's not making that much more today than they were making years and years ago, right? I don't want to speak too much because every community is different and I'm not an expert on people's town, but in general, in ministry, youth pastors and worship leaders and production people and kids, and so these, you're entering into, you've chosen, like you said, didn't go into it for the check. You're definitely not going to build wealth.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to launch this thing and then sell it, like an app or something.
Yep.
You've already chose, that's already one. And then two, you're going to top out. If you're an amazing person and you're still working, if you're called, to use your word, if you're called and you're still at it, you're going to top out somewhere pretty far south. And it's more of a personal conversation than one that I want to record in a webinar.
Sure.
But the escalation of, if you look at where education was in the early 90s versus where it is today, even with all the innovation and the cost cutting and the savings, and it is astronomically outpaced. That in healthcare has outpaced everything else based on earning potential and stuff. And yet the earnings of where we are over here have remained quiet. So at some point, you just have to go, it's immoral. This is immoral. I don't know what else to call it. You're right. And we have to address, there are people addressing it.
Yep. And I think it's the future of what we have to try to figure out in the church space is to go, we've got to find a way to continue to equip the future pastors of the church, the future leaders of the church, to do it without incurring that level of debt.
Right.
And there's some people that are down the road on it that are doing well with it.
Yeah. I think I do, and I see them too. And it's ones and twos at a time. It's I don't know that there's a scale here. Everyone wants to talk about scale. I don't know if there's a scale here.
Nope. I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think we're there yet.
What's not, we're almost out of time. And what hasn't changed and what's not gonna change? This is one of my recent rants I'm on right now. What do you think has not changed and what's not gonna change?
Yeah. Well, we already talked about it a little bit. I mean, you've got to let development drive. Yeah. You got to let development drive, and you've got to want more for them than from them.
Yeah. And from you guys.
And somebody at the church has to go to the wall for that on behalf of the residents. Yeah. And here's what's true, because it's counterintuitive to everything else that happens in the church. The rest of the job descriptions of the people on the staff at that church are there to solve ministry pressure. Right. And so it's almost counterintuitive or antithetical to what they're doing. Yes. Somebody's got to be the one to go, I won't allow it. I'm not going to allow it to happen.
Right. And most churches are, and that's why I don't knock the church. I'm not going to knock the church for not being good at it, because most even large churches are very small businesses, and you'd be hard pressed to find a business with 50 employees, which is a big church. That's 4,000 people on a weekend. Or they don't have an internal developmental process for people that show up with liberal arts degrees to learn how. They don't. And it is, if they're in their 20s, it is chaos in those companies. Yeah. So I don't think we have to knock and feel bad. And I hear people say churches don't know how to develop leaders. Well, no, I think humans don't know how to develop leaders, period.
No, I think so. And it's what we talked about a second ago. It's because it's important, but it's not urgent until it's urgent. And then we're all looking around going like, well, and I get, like you do too, Dave, I get to talk to a lot of churches who are launching residency programs, and they ask me what to do. And part of it is I ask them, why are you starting this? Yeah, right. And it's like, well, we're 5 years behind where we want to be in staffing. Yeah. And it's like, well, that thought is already putting solving pressure in the driver's seat. Right. And you're going to have a program for a little while. That's right. And then you're going to burn kids out.
Yeah. I know you've seen it too, but people that start with it's like a sprint.
Mm-hmm.
and they've already shut it down, when tight budget years come and they don't own the why behind that stuff. It can be tough.
Yes.
My sense, man, a couple thousand years ago, Paul looked at Timothy. He said, do it this way. We do it sort of like this. Tell other people about this.
Yep.
And today, these leaders we're looking at young leaders. Do it like this. Try this.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you do it like that. I should do. I mean,
yeah, I could do it like that.
My story these days, like, oh, wow,
Yeah.
I'm learning. And I think if we're still here, if the church is still rolling in 2,000 years, if we're here, it will be, first of all, because the gates of hell are not going to prevail against it. It might look all sorts of crazy ways, right? Mm-hmm. We still are going to have the older leaders showing the younger leaders, here's how we lead.
It never stops.
It never stops. It's not going to change.
Never stops.
We might as well embrace this now.
Mm-hmm.
And for churches that we talk to every weekday, they're trying to make a decision if they have to do it. 5 years ago, Andy, I would have said, yeah, you ought to think about launching, you ought to think about bringing on an intern.
Mm-hmm.
Today, I'm like, you have to do this. You have to do this. And it is the 3 to 4 year answer. It's like that. Is it a Chinese proverbs? When's the best time to plant a tree? 25 years ago, or tomorrow, today,
Mm-hmm.
And I think residency is that. I
agree 100%. Well, how many leaders would we like to have? Like as many as we can get. How many people would you like moving the kingdom forward?
Yeah.
Well, as many as you can get. So why would we not do everything we can to help make that a reality?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for making it a reality. And there are even the people, you don't know their names, you never talk to them. People like me, I'm like, check out the 12stone, go to here, click here, just make your landing, something like that. Just look, that one's awesome. Let's just get going. I mean, so you guys are influencing and you don't even know. And so we appreciate your work, and you're at a place that, I say thank you. And then I say you should be doing it. Because you're the best. You guys are the first ones there, and the team and the staff and the resources you've put behind it, and the rest of us are just coming in behind you. So
I'm very grateful because I get to stand on the shoulders of a lot of people, which is great. But also this too, if I can ever be helpful to anybody.
Yeah. How can these people find you?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you my email address. I'll throw it in the chat.
Okay.
And you guys are welcome to email me. I'll tell you this, it's not every month, but most months, I do a Zoom call and I walk through the structure of our residency program and do real practical answer how-tos. And if I can be a help to anybody, I would be happy to do it.
When will you start the national gathering of all the people that care about this? The NAGT, I don't know what the letters would be. Can you start that?
Let's start with some Zoom calls, and then we'll see what that leads to.
All right. Appreciate you. Thanks for the time.
Dave. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm going to drop here's a link. I'll drop this here. It'll also be, I think this gets posted to YouTube as well, and I'll put it in those notes. But if you're ready and you want to talk, and anything that you've heard that you thought sounded crazy or you need to know more about, you can hit it there. And we'll see you next month. Or actually, we won't see you next month. We'll see you in August, because next month is July 4th. Hopefully you're eating a hot dog and shooting off fireworks. So thanks for being here, everybody. Take care. Thanks, Andy.
Yep. Bye.